Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. This is Ramadan day 2 here in the UK, and I am back with another episode of my Pondering at the Pond series. And today I'm going to talk to you about the imagery of the Qur'an. So, as I sit in this glorious setting, I'm going to read out to you an excerpt from Kenneth Cragg's book, The Event of the Qur'an. Written in stunning prose, Cragg's work brought to my attention some amazing features of the Quran, and one of those features is its imagery. So I wanted to share that with you because I remember when I read the book maybe 4 or 5 years ago, it was so beautifully written. Kenneth Cragg was such an erudite scholar, so eloquent, so poetic in his writing. And when I read the book, it just situated the Quran so beautifully in its history. Because Cragg's making the point, the Quran is an event in history. So not only is it a timeless text that talks to us across time and space and generations, it is actually also an event in history itself, revealed in the 7th century, revealed in a desert region, revealed in the Hijaz. And it is this he's trying to bring to light, what was that setting like? And I found his book so moving, and it was a complete paradigm shift for me. It just suddenly brought the Quran's immediate setting alive in my mind, and I thought I'd share a little bit with you today. And of course you can find his book online. You can buy a second-hand copy. This is what I did, and you found it quite cheaply. As I said, the book's titled The Event of the Quran. I'm now reading from chapter 5 of the book. The title of the chapter is The Landscape of the Hijaz, and the excerpts I'm reading are from pages 86 to 89. I'm not going to read the full pages, don't worry. I'm just going to read some excerpts from that. So starting from page 86, Cragg first quotes Surah 90, verse 1 to 3. I'll start the translation of the verse. Nay, I swear by this land, the land of your belonging, by father and fathered. Truly in trouble have we created man. Surah 90, verse 1 to 3. The invocations of the early Quran return repeatedly to the immensities of nature and the mysteries of birth. Physical features, both of land and people, recur through its poetry. The dominating sense is of harshness in the landscape and hardship in the human lot, relieved by the gentler temper of the oases with their groves and gardens, and by the brittle luxuries of city dwelling. The geography of the Quran embraces both the nomadic and the urban, the tribal spaces and the cultic metropolis, the precipitous escarpments of dry ravines or the wastes of shifting sand, and the precarious caravan-borne merchandise of streets and fairs. The aim of this and the following chapter is to focus in turn on these two aspects of Quranic locale, from which almost all its metaphors and parables are drawn. The topography of Muhammad's native land has a lively relation to the book, which is its greatest pride. Who will give you to apprehend the steep ascent? Who will give you to apprehend the steep ascent? Continues Surah 90. To know the Aqaba, the rocky defile that winds its toilsome way among the boulders and across the rugged screes towards the summit. For this is how the freeing of the slave and the feeding of the hungry tell against the grain of human indolence and self-regard. Moral man is nothing if not a mountaineer. I'm moving now to page 88 of the book. We find the landscape of the Hijaz and the human meaning of its features grim and grand, dominating the imagery and the homilies of the scripture. The day of retribution will be like the shifting mountains of sand. Chapter 73, verse 14. Those wind-borne disruptions of the contours are like the treacherous cliffs that detach themselves and pour into the valleys. The evil man is as one who sets his house on the edge of a crumbling precipice that crashes down with him into the infernal fire. Chapter 9, verse 110. The believer who parades his bounty or compromises it with injury is like a smooth rock whose narrow shelf of soil is swept away by a torrent and only barrenness remains. This is Surah Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 264. In contrast with the irrigated garden where the flash flood is harnessed productively and there is dew when it fails. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 265. These images of parched and barren earth suggest the careworn faces of eternity with only the cactus thorn for food. The cactus thorn for food is mentioned in chapter 88, verse 3 and 6. The cruel Scirocco, the withering wind, figures in the story of the tribe of Ad, a strong and ancient people of Quranic retrospect. In its path, everything turns to wanness, plants and fruits and faces, until decaying vegetation lays a dark pall upon the Wadi valleys. But the precarious tillage of the Hijaz springs also into sudden vigour by the quickening rains. By the heaven of returning rain, the rain that brings returns, runs the invocation of chapter 86, verse 11. And by the earth bursting with growth, the word is verily decisive, it is no idle pleasantry. Repeatedly, the Qur'an makes the reader visualize the glad, incredible wonder of renewing vegetation, not in the steady, predictable sequences of the temperate zones, but in the arbitrary, unheralded, emphatic interventions of tropical downpour, saturating the earth almost before the darkening clouds have roused it for the onslaught. Cragg then gives his rendition of verse 25 to 32 from chapter 80. We poured down the copious rain, cleaving the ground like fissures, and making grain and grapes and vegetation, olives and dates, and laden orchards, fruits and pastures, all to grow delightsome for you and for your flocks. So we walk up a steep ascent as we do our tazkiya, the inner purification and cleansing to turn ourselves into better people connected to Allah, ethical, fair, grounded, compassionate, aspiring to excellence in all we do. And the Quran reveals this message within its glorious imagery of using the steep mountain ascent as a metaphor, or talking about a dead land being brought to life when there is sudden downpour, the bounty of rain from God. In the next episode, I'm going to share with you some reflections on the Quranic metaphor of the path as well, which I often mention in my videos. I often say that the Quran is very interested in the believer's journey. It is the journey and the path that matters. Let me finish by repeating Cragg's beautiful insight into how challenging the path is. He says, moral man is nothing if not a mountaineer. Assalamu alaikum.